Hi guys, we're going to talk about that final paper just a little bit. It is going to be over 66% of your final grade, and that's going to be 1,320 points. Okay, and that's big, that's huge, but I don't want you to be worried about it. The way this class is set up is to kind of build in baby steps and using Legos, whatever analogy that works for you. We're going to build this paper throughout the semester. That is the primary goal of this class, is to teach you how to break down an enormous task like a 20-page paper into manageable bits so that in the future you'll be able to do that not only with writing but with pretty much any big tasks that you have. So the entire goal of this class is to prepare for this big paper. So 20 pages seems like a lot, and it is, but we're going to make it manageable. We got this. We'll get you there, okay? Alright, this final paper is going to reflect a clear knowledge of the discourse community, that's your audience, and your field and your career path, the current conversation on whatever topic you're going, that's all the research you're going to be doing, and the conventions of your field. It's going to be the doc style that you're going to be working on. It needs to be very detailed, very focused. Your thesis is going to be pretty narrow. You have the literal world that you can write about, anything in your field of interest, your career. It just needs to come from the perspective of a problem, which is one of the things that we talk about in class. So don't worry too much about that idea of a problem just yet. We'll get you there. But it's going to be a fairly narrow, unique thesis. Okay, it's going to be the culmination of your drafts, your peer reviews, your outlines. It's going to be awesome and amazing. But what specifically with that big paper are we looking for outside the topic? Essentially, what we want to talk about right now is what that paper is going to actually look like. Okay. The details, it needs to be 18 pages long. This is the minimum and excludes all the extras, okay? It does not count cover pages. That 18 pages does not count abstract pages. That 18 pages does not count your references. It needs to be 18 pages of clean prose that you wrote. And of course, you're going to be using quoted material and paraphrased content, of course, cited properly, right? To support what you're saying. Block quotes, quotes that are longer than 40 words or 4 lines of text, do not count towards that 18 pages. We really want it to be the bulk of your writing with the sources that you used to support what you're saying, not say it for you. Additionally, those 18 pages, if we use charts or graphs or pictures, which for some of our doc styles are totally acceptable, for other doc styles not as acceptable, but we'll talk about that. If you use, say, a half a page chart, your paper needs to be 18 and a half pages, okay? We really want it to be 18 pages of prose. And again, 18 pages is a huge number, but we will work together to get you there, okay? 18 pages minimum, doesn't count all the extras, okay? Your paper needs to include 12 plus academic sources. Several weeks of our class are going to be dedicated to finding those sources, learning how to use our databases, learning what counts as credible. But we do need to have a minimum of 12 academic sources. You can use as many sources as is necessary to support what you're saying. It is not uncommon for students to have 20 sources, okay, but you do need to have a minimum of 12 academic sources properly integrated and cited in your paper. All the sources you use, of course, need to be properly integrated and cited. Anything that you list in your reference page needs to be used in your paper. More on that in a bit. And those 12 plus academic sources, those main 12 that you're using, need to be a minimum of 10 pages long. Okay, sometimes when we get into our research, we find super awesome, super credible, and super informative articles that are only 5 pages long. That's cool, okay? So you can use those, but you need to have a minimum of 12 that are 10 pages long. So if you found 12 10-page articles and 7 5-page articles, you're going to have, I don't know, I'm bad at math, 19 sources, okay? So when you're doing your research, don't dismiss those shorter articles. They just need to be what we call alternative sources. Alright, so to recap just a little bit, needs to be 18 pages of your writing, and that doesn't include your abstracts, cover page, reference pages in that. And you need to have a minimum of 12 academic articles that fit the length requirements for this course. And for the record, I do not set that. It is a department regulation that they need to be 10 pages or longer. Okay, and we'll talk more about that requirement in class. Oops, we got big. Alright, this is the only component for your final draft. You do not have to bring in a paper copy to class. You can if you want, because I have had it in the past, students come in and throw it on my desk and say, there, are you happy? It's very cathartic, and you could totally do that if you want. Please keep in mind that this is an example. This due date here may not be applicable to you. I will make it very clear when that assignment is due throughout the semester. I will give you lots of reminders. I want to talk about grading just a little bit before we get done with this little video. Alright, if you hit 18 pages, bam, you have 100 points. Woo, that's awesome. What I want to point out here is sometimes I have students ask, well, what happens if I can't write 18 pages? And you know what, that happens. Maybe you're not going to be able to. The way that we compromise with that is you get an automatic 2% reduction in total points if you do not hit that 18-page mark. So if you say write 17 pages and not 18 pages, you'll lose 2%. You'll start out with a 98% instead of 100%. And if that's the choice that you make with your paper, then we'll make sure together that the rest of your paper is super awesome and amazing, and you do get that 98% if you hit all of the other requirements. If you feel you're going to miss that 18-page count, talk with me and we'll see what we can do to foster further discussion in your paper and to make sure that the rest of it is super great. Right under that, you'll notice that I ask if you turn in all outlines and drafts. That's 75 points. Super easy to make, especially since I make all outlines and drafts required. So it's like 75 free points. Woo! Underneath that, we have a question about using academic and scholarly sources. This is those minimum ones that I was talking about, those 12 academic articles that are 10 pages long. The most important takeaway of this section is if you do not utilize all 12 academic sources in your paper, you will lose an automatic 25%. Let me say that again in a different way. If you only have 10 academic sources in your reference page, you will lose 25%. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have the minimum 12. We also need to make sure that we're using them, because if we have sources listed in our reference page that we do not use, this is important, it's an automatic failure. Okay, guys, so if you have 15 sources listed in your reference page, you need to have 15 sources used in your paper. And we will go through all of your drafts to make sure that you're doing that, because it's not my goal in this class to fail you. It's my goal in this class to make sure that you succeed. So if I notice that you're not using all of your references, I'll point it out, and we'll talk about how you can get them in there. Essentially, the takeaway of this section is get 12 academic sources and use all the sources that you list. Now we have a couple key points here, focus, competency of ideas, critical thinking, all of that kind of stuff that we're going to talk about throughout the semester. I do want to point out that there's going to be a little bit of synthesis required. If you're not sure what synthesis is, that's alright, we'll talk about it. And that's one of the reasons why we need to have so many sources. We want our sources to kind of talk to each other to support our paper, so we do want to have some synthesis going. Also, there's a question on here, right here where my little hand is, do you have effective integration and anchoring of all sources? We'll talk about anchoring throughout the semester, but essentially what this question is asking is, do you actually integrate your sources effectively? And if you don't, we lose 25 points, but if you do, that's 25 points easily made. Again, that's one of the things that I will look at really closely in your drafts to make sure that we are effectively utilizing all of those sources that we are asking you to use. Audience awareness is the next section. We want to make sure that we are writing appropriately to our audience. That's the people in our career that we're trying to go into. We'll talk about it quite a bit. Can I tell you wrote it? If it is consistent with all of your other writings, that's an easy 20 points. Yay! Is it your paper? Awesome, you get 20 points just for making sure it's your paper. Appropriate use of doc style conventions is also included in there, and again, that's something that we're going to talk about throughout the entire semester. We do have an organization and grammar section as well. We want to make sure that we are writing with proper grammar throughout our entire paper. And finally, our documentation section. These are flat points lost, and it's one of the key things that we're going to be looking at, because we are writing for a specific audience. We are expected to use appropriate format, and that's why we got to have that manual we talked about in class and in our syllabus. Make sure that we are formatting our paper correctly, and the cool news is I make you do this very early in the semester, where we actually make a documentation style template. So before you even sit down to write this paper, you are going to have 120 points towards that, because you're going to have a template to use that makes sure that your paper is appropriately formatted with all of those extras, and that your in-text citations are appropriate. Those are things that we're going to check throughout every draft that you do. Alright, and that all comes together to be 1,320 points. I know that this is a lot of information, and it's big and it's scary. And we will talk about each and every one of these steps throughout the semester, but I do want to give you a heads up on how your final paper will be graded, since all of our assignments build upon each other to that ultimate goal. And again, we're going to talk about it extensively throughout the semester. It's the whole point of the class is to get this paper written, and I will support you every step of the way. It's big, it's scary, but you've got this. You're going to do awesome.